Hi, this is Danny from Folk of All Trades and welcome to our natural dyeing video. I want to start by thanking Resilient South for supporting this video in our series. So Resilient South is the cities of Holdfast Bay, Marion, Mitcham and Onkaparinga. I want to start with acknowledging that I'm here on Kaurna land, and particularly for natural dyeing we're looking at lots of native plants, and I want to acknowledge that First Nations people have and still today use plants for dye materials, and so it's a really important part of their culture. And so I feel very privileged, very blessed to be able to use natural plants here, our Australian native plants, in natural dyeing. So natural dyeing, I'll show you an example of what we're going to look at today and what we're going to start doing, which is eco-printing. So eco-printing is a type of natural dyeing that is where you sort of use the shape of the leaves and the tannins and the colour within it to dye some fabric. There's lots of other ways to do natural dyeing. There's, pigment dyeing. There's this thing called hapazome where you hammer. That's a great one for kids, this hapazome. But yeah, there's lots of different ones, but this is the one we're going to look at today. Eco-printing is often associated with an artist called India Flint, and there's lots of other fantastic botanical natural dyers out there who I'd recommend looking into. So I've learned this over quite a few trial and errors, but that's worth saying straight up that it's very experimental natural dyeing, as in there's so many different factors, from what fabric you're using to the water pH to the mordants. I'll cover this in a minute, but anyway, there's just loads of little factors that if you tweak one way or the other can have quite different results. So just be aware it's very experimental. So you can end up with things that you really like, but also I've done things that I've thought, oh, maybe that's not quite as good as I thought. This was a shirt, and I mean it's okay, but it's probably a bit more on the leaf prints are a bit less obvious. This is a cineraria, it's a eucalyptus that goes red. So it's fine, it's nice, but it's it wasn't as crisp and clear as that one. So you're going to have failures as well as successes, but I mean they're not really failures. So just know that you'll get very different results every time, and that's part of the fun of it. I also, just before we get into it, want to do a quick note on safety, just health and safety really, because natural dyeing, you can see we're outside here. Ventilation is a really important part of this type of natural dyeing because we're sort of steaming things and we're using materials that, I don't know if they're poison, but they're natural things that are in certain doses we've just got to be wary of. For example, this is bits of iron. You can see some rusty iron in there, and that is, I'm going to explain this now actually, that is iron that I put vinegar and water in, and it basically causes what we call iron water. A mordant is something that helps fix the dye to the fabric basically. And that, there's nothing necessarily wrong with iron, but you've got to be careful with rusty iron. So generally you're going to wear gloves when you're dealing with that. And like I said, as you're heating the dye pot, which we'll see in a bit, there's just fumes. So normal health and safety things, outside, gloves and so on and so forth, and be careful because you've got hot things and whatnot. All right, but I want to get straight into the process of how we actually do a dye. We're going to roll it out in a minute and do it, and go from there. So this is my little sort of summary of things we're going to do. So we're going to look at choosing both the fabric and the dye stuff. So what does that mean? We'll look at how we prepare it. That's actually probably one of the biggest steps, is preparing. The more prep you do, the better the result, I think. The dyeing part itself, and then afterwards I suppose there's a bit of caring for the fabrics because they're a little bit different. But like I said, it's experimental, be safe, and ethical, which just means when you're finding materials and things, make sure we're not over harvesting or harvesting from anywhere we shouldn't and whatnot. So that's my little run sheet. So let's start with our choosing. I'm going to get my fabrics over here, put this one out the way. So when you're choosing fabrics to dye, you really have to have natural fibres. It's quite an amazing relationship that natural plants obviously take to natural fibres. They just don't really take to polyesters and acrylics or anything. So you are looking for cottons, you're looking for wools, I suppose you could look at silks or hemp or linen. So yeah, natural fibres are really important. Now they're very much in two categories, and I'll show you them here. So the cottons, the hemps, anything from a plant is a cellulose fibre. So yeah, that means it is plant material, whereas your wool particularly, and then also silk would fall into that category, they are protein sort of fibers. Now you're probably thinking, why do I need to know all this? It's a bit technical. Well, the dye fixes to proteins. So the dye, basically, if you've got your wool particularly, and also silk, the dye just, it takes it so well, it's really crisp and clear, so you would have seen on that blanket. Really, if you want to have a easy win and know you're going to get quite a good success rate, then I'd look for old blankets. Generally, the lighter, plainer colours means you'll see the print. But yeah, this one's a bit more of a pinky colour, but it should still show up. Obviously, it's just going to have a pink undertone, so it doesn't have to be white or anything. But yeah, wool particularly is going to be really reliable, I suppose is the word. However, we want to maybe choose fabrics that we can find in op shops or are more ethically made, so something like a hemp, or you can just find cottons, particularly 100% cottons, normally quite cheaply and easily at op shops. So you can get old cotton shirts. You can go through the op shop racks and look for things that are white or cream and that are 100% cotton. However, they're not going to take the dye colour as well as wool. So remember how I said this is protein? Well, what we do, and I can show you over here, is you can add a protein to the fibre. So this is the leftovers of some soy bean, which I made, basically soy milk. A really, really crude, really simple soy milk, because soy has protein. So under here, I'm just using the plate to keep it all down. I've made my own very, very simple soy milk, and I have submerged cottons in there. Now, some of those I actually dipped many times. So that's quite a fantastic tradition from Japan. Lots of people would know indigo as these blue colors from Japan, and soy. They have tofu and they like using soy products. So in Japan, they would make a soy milk, basically. They would dip their cottons and dry them, dip them, dry them, dip them, dry them. You could do it once, you could do it 10 times. And that's adding protein to that fiber, so it's going to act like wool. You don't have to do any of that. Like I said, with all this stuff, it's experimental. And sometimes it is really good to experiment a bit and keep records, if you're that sort of person. I'm not often that sort of person. However, I did once do it. So this, I'll hold these up so you can actually see them quite clearly. So this one is a calico that has, I believe if I look on the corners, yes, this was not dipped in cotton at all, but it was scoured. I'll talk about scouring in a minute. This one, I had to embroider it so I didn't lose, was dipped once in the soy milk. So that's maybe a bit darker. It's taken the colour a bit better. And then this last one was dipped 4 times in the soy milk, and it's given it like a more browny colour. Anyway, it's just a calico, so it's not the clearest print, but I did actually experiment and try different dippings. So if you're a really meticulous record keeper, you could do things like that. However, if you don't want to do any of that, the least you'd want to do, the first step at least, is really thoroughly clean anything you're going to dye with, because if it's got stains or sweat patches or something in a spot, it will dye differently. So we do what's called scouring, which is basically in a pot, not this one, I've got a dedicated one, but you boil. If it's cotton or something, you boil it up with, I think I've got washing soda, and you're basically giving it a really thorough clean so that all the greases and everything are out of it. You want to do that with new fabric too. Yeah. Like I said, it's all an experiment, but I'd highly recommend really thoroughly cleaning or scouring your fabrics first. So that's choosing our fabrics. So we've got different things. Oh, I went into prepping there, see? So to prep, other than maybe scouring or soy milk dipping, the only other thing you want to do is in here is actually soak them before you dye them. So that is just water. And this one I haven't put soy on or anything. I think I scoured it, so I really cleaned it. There's a piece of wool in there as well. So just soaking in water for, I mean, it could be even a couple of hours is going to be beneficial, or overnight or something. And that is so that the dye takes up a bit more evenly. So yeah, at least do a good soak. Basically, that fabric is ready to dye with. So we'll do that in a minute. However, we've got to find our plant material as well. So we've chosen our fabrics. I'll get those ones out of the way. We have scoured them or soy dipped them if we're going to. And now we are going to look for our plant material that we actually dye with as well. So I'll bring this up in here. Now, I use a lot of local Australian native plants. I did find this book as well, Dyes from Plants of Australia and New Zealand, but there's also loads of resources online. If you want to check out online, you know, there's wonderful people out there who've made lists of plants that will and won't work. But basically what you're looking for is a plant that's really high in tannins, you know, like tea tannins, because that has generally will have some colour in it. However, there are dedicated plants that have more colour, like you saw on this one. These are leaves, the red dots. That's a particular eucalyptus that produces red. So you can, I mean, this is too short a video to go into it, but you can go out there and find plants that give you particular colours. But if you want to just beginner start, which is really what this is to introduce you, I would go out and particularly look for gum leaves and acacia leaves. So generally your gum leaves and your acacia are going to have lots of tannins in it, so they're going to give some colour. However, some species do and some don't. So what you'll see from my basket in here is that I've just got a whole bunch of different stuff. I've even got some she oaks. Experiment, that's what I was saying about experimenting. So you find different things and give it a go. Obviously, we're going to ethically harvest this, so ideally it's from your own garden or someone you know, and you just take a little bit. You obviously can't take from national parks and public spaces really, so yeah, get permission of whoever has the trees or plants and just take a little bit. So I went out and I just got all these little prunings, and then to prepare them, I've actually put them in, again, soaking. I've got them soaking in here, and actually in here I made that iron water, which is what I showed you over here a moment ago. So I'll just show you this again. So I put vinegar and water in here that caused basically a irony, browny water basically, and that's what they're submerged in. I really like using iron, and this is where I'm trying to give you a bit of an overview, but I particularly like iron because it gives really dark, sort of moody colours is the best way to describe it, but some dyers don't like that. That is not their preference of a mordant, that fixing. So some people use what's called alum, just to be careful because you've got to be really safe with it. It's sort of a poison. But yeah, some people use alum, some people use different metal pots, some people use vinegar. Anyway, it's a whole world of stuff out there, but I really like iron because I like the colour it gives, this kind of dark, punchy, moody colour. So that's why they're in iron water here. So I think that's most of our stuff prepped. So we've got our fabrics that have been soaking, and we've got our dye stuff, which has also been soaking and it was also prepared. So basically, according to my lovely spreadsheet, so choosing the fabric and the dye stuff and then prepping it, I'm now sort of getting to the dye part, and I'm going to combine them together. And I'll show you how I do that over here. So I'll get some of these bits out the way, because you can see here as well, I've got a table that's sort of out over in my garden, so I can be a bit messy. So this can get quite messy. You'll probably also notice my slightly dodgy top. This was actually sort of a slightly failed dye. Oh, it's not that bad. I think I tried dip dyeing it and it all went a bit patchy. Anyway, it's all gone a bit weird. It's fine. It's now one of the tops I wear to dye with. So obviously don't wear nice clothes. Don't do this in a nice inside clean space. You're going to get messy with the next bit. I'm going to put that down just for a second. So I've got my table. You want your table fairly clear, but it doesn't have to be perfectly clean. And I want to get I want to wring out some of the water, but not heaps and heaps. Remember, this top is one that I have scoured. So I boiled it up with washing soda and maybe a bit of dishwashing liquid, and now has been soaking overnight actually. So it's nice and wet. Now this table isn't perfectly clean, but obviously I'm about to put all sorts of leaves and stuff on it. There's a bit of dirt, but that's all right. So I'm going to spread this out. This is actually this pure cotton Op Shop t-shirt, but it's, I don't know how to describe it. It's very lightly ribbed, so it's got that stretch to it. They actually take up dye really well, the slightly ribbed look. And so that's all ready to go. I'm going to get my leaves, and I'm actually going to put on gloves because I've had the leaves in iron water. Let me move this over so you can see it. Yeah, I've had the leaves in iron water. Now iron isn't a big problem in itself necessarily. However, you shouldn't have it too much in contact with your skin. So I'm just going to reuse some first aid gloves, health and safety. My hands are wet, so it's hard to get gloves on. For placing them. Like I said, it's probably not a big issue, but I do like to be a bit more safe. All right. So I have all my leaves in here, and then you get to start being the really creative bit. This probably is, other than revealing it then, this is one of the most fun parts. Now we're going to be rolling this up, and we're probably going to fold it in half. So I'm actually going to think of a pattern. We're going to fold this and roll. Look how dirty the table is. That'll be fine. That's on the outside, so it's the boil part. Yeah, well, I'm going to lay it like half because we're going to have a mirror. So I'm going to get my gum leaves. I don't know. I think I'm going to do a slightly more. You can do completely random, or you can go for a pattern. I'm going to kind of go for a pattern. You can take individual leaves. I actually like the leaves with the bites and the imperfections. They're some of my favourites. Sometimes I put in like the gum nuts and the other bits and pieces because I never know what's going to come out, and I think that's pretty fun. I do go probably quite dense because some of these leaves might not work. And so I'm going to put extra in just in case they don't print. Some of the other ones might. Yeah, I love leaves like this with all the dents and things, but that's my aesthetic. People have different aesthetics, and it's totally up to you. Gum nuts, I can show you on a blanket in a minute what some of the gum nuts look like. You've got to have nothing too chunky though, because you've got to roll this really tight, and you'll see that in the next step. All right, I'm going to go a bit more she oak because I really love the she oak. I'm going to put some down the bottom and in the middle. And I think I'll go just a couple more. I'll try and pick some different types of gum leaves. Well, these are a particularly large one. Now, if I was really well behaved, I would actually like record which gum leaves, which species and what they are and do tests. And then I'd be able to know, yes, if it worked or not. But I reckon that's pretty good. It's pretty good coverage. I've got it all over in different spots. I'm just going to put a couple of extras in case that variety of gum leaf doesn't work. I'm just going to put a couple of extras there. All right. So if you step back now, I'll show you the next bit. So I'm going to fold and be rolling. So I probably, yeah, that table is probably a bit too dirty, but like I said, that's the back of the t-shirt, so I'm not too fussed. But I'm basically going to roll it like that. And this is why you don't want anything too chunky in there, because you're about to roll this. And as you roll it, you can put a bit more in, actually, if you want to. You can, on the back, I'm going to go with just some tea tree and some little fine things. I've never tried tea tree before, so this is one of my first experiments with it. Okay, great. So now I'm going to roll this up. And what am I rolling it around? So I'll show you here. Anything round that you can roll it. So these are actually 3 different things. I have a piece of bamboo, which would work pretty well. This is just a stick, and you can see an old gum leaf actually from a previous dye. That's literally just a bit of a tree branch, but this is metal. It's probably a bit of iron as well. And because I personally really quite like that iron look, I might use this one on this, but it doesn't really matter. Something that you can roll it around. So I'm going to start rolling. Where you start is the inside of the bundle, so will be a bit less dye, but not dramatically less. And now this is the bit. You are going to start rolling it, and you're going to roll it as tightly as you can, really tucking all those bits in. And I'm pushing quite hard and rolling it around. I'm pushing down quite hard and rolling it. While I'm at the top here, I'm going to put another cheeky little bit of gum leaf, because why not, in there. And then I'm going to finish rolling it up, and I've made this little package, this little round package. At this point, obviously if I put that in the dye bar, it'll unravel, so I'm going to tie it. I think this was probably the biggest difference in the results that I had, whether they were good or not, was probably this next step, was how tightly I tight. You can't tie it too tightly, basically. So the next step, you can use, for the next step to tie it up, you can use, I don't know what this is, a bit of cotton sort of cord. You can use skinnier string. You can use really thick. It doesn't really matter, but you want quite a lot. So this next stage is basically putting it on. There's probably fancier ways to do this, but I am simply going to, can you hear that creaking? I don't know if you can. I'm going to tie a knot. There's probably, like I said, a fancy way to do it. But this next bit, this is the bit. So I'm going to, and I'm going to do this as tightly as I can, I'm going to really push down on this. And I'm going to make, it's the contact with the leaves, the plants, and the cotton, nice and tight, that will give you a print. So, like, get some muscle in there, really tightly bind it on. And if you don't have enough string, get another piece. Get another piece. In fact, this one probably won't be quite enough because I want to do it a bit extra to tie it off. Sometimes I like to go back to there where my little piece is. Here's my tail. Oh, see how nice and tight that is? Because then I've got something to tie it off to. But that wasn't enough, so I'm going to get, I might get a thicker piece. Oh no, here, there's another one, the same sort of thickness. Like I said, it doesn't matter. I want to, there we go. Because it's really important, it's not a step you want to, skip out on. You want to absolutely do it. So you can see it again. There's probably a nice way I can do a knot that means it will come undone easier. However, this is going to be in the dye pot for hours, so you don't want to have it come unraveling on you out there. All your hard work is not going to pay off. I'm tired doing this. So almost done. Right down to the bottom, and this will actually give you a really nice pattern. I'll show you in a minute the pattern you can get from this. Right, where's my other tail? There's one there. Okay, that is your little bundle. This is your little baby, and this is what's going to go into the dye bath. Oh, that was hard work. So there it is. This is your bundle. I'll take these off in a minute. And this is what is going to go into the dye bath. And then we kind of wait, but I'll show putting it in. So the dye bath I have is a pot, and then I'll talk about equipment over here actually. Want to follow me over? I'm just going to turn it off for a second so you can hear me. So this is quite hot water. Cottons can take the hot water. Wools and silk you have to be a bit more gentle with and not have them quite so hot, or don't submerge them in hot. And bring it up slowly, but yeah, cottons are pretty tough. So this one is just water, and it is in a dedicated pot. So this pot was, I think, from the op shop, and you can see I'm outside on an induction, but you could be on gas, on a camping stove. Doesn't really matter, but yeah, this is not for cooking now, this is just for dyeing. So I am going to simply submerge it in, put the baby into the bath. Ideally, and perfect, this one's great, you can see it's going to fully submerge itself. Yeah, it's really sunk, so it's fully under the water, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to put the lid back on to keep it nice and hot. I can turn this back on now. And now you wait. This is the bit where you've got to be patient for quite a while. But basically, you can make up a whole load of bundles. You can have more than one. You could probably fit multiple in there. So you want to have a bit of a day to do this. You can make up lots more little bundles. Like I said, wool's really fun, so I'd probably do this next. Lace some things. You don't have to roll always as well. Sometimes you can fold. However, you've just got to make sure when you fold, you really put pressure. Remember, it's that pressure onto it that means the dye will take it. So yeah, and then you fill your pot up. You basically leave it to bubble away for at least 3 or 4 hours, ideally 6 hours or 2 days, because yeah, it will want that time to really infuse. So next thing we want to see is the results. Obviously I can't see the results from that one, so I'll show you a few others. I wanted to show you over here some of the results of different dye things. So when you unravel it, you should get some lovely, lovely patterns. So this one obviously has some acacia and some eucalyptus in it, very speckled. This is a merino wool, so it took the dye really, really quite nicely, gave that speckled pattern. But I also wanted to show the one, it's up here. This one, when it was unrolled, so I unrolled it, so you can see the leaves and everything here. This is the she oak actually. So that's some of the she oak, and these are the gum nuts. I said I'd mention those. So that's where the gum nuts were. And actually at the end, at the very end, you can see the string. So this pattern is that, you know, that tight binding I was doing. It actually gives you stripes. So some people actually just really love that too. Anyway, I hope that was a good introduction to natural dyeing. Obviously there's, you know, you can, if you're into it, you can do days and weeks and year-long courses in this to really learn the details and the nuance. But it's a really fun craft. I highly recommend getting into it, and let us know if you have any questions. We'll see you soon.